My name is Dexter Mays, and I'm going to talk to you about an issue that's really important to me, and that's the issue of police abolition. So the conversation around the abolition of police has been growing in popularity over the last couple of years, and the reasons why people are motivated to educate themselves on it become clearer and clearer each day. Millions of people in this country have needs that are not being met, and instead of meeting them, the state chooses to give those resources instead to the most violent oppressors this country has, the police. Since their very inception, police forces have been a state tool for violence, with low-income communities being subject to that violence at a rate multiple times that of a more wealthy community. Due to the extreme rates of police brutality, the obscene amounts of federal money given to police every year, and the inability of police officers to stop actual crimes, the police should be abolished and the resources should be used to build better infrastructure to help the local community. This is Ernie Serrano. He was killed on December 14th, 2020. A Jurupa Valley resident, he was having both a bad drug experience and a bad mental health experience in a Stater Brothers. And after an altercation with security, the sheriffs were called, and that led to the fatal incident that led to his death. So video was released of deputies beating Serrano with batons and using a taser, but the police department still stated officially that the cause of death was the drugs that were in Serrano's system. Robert McMillan wrote about it in the Press Enterprise, or local paper, and said, quote, "Even if there were drugs in Serrano's system, deputies should have known how to handle the situation in a way that didn't lead to his death. I don't care if he was on coke, meth, drinking, whatever it was," said his mother. "You're not trained to rush in and start hitting him." Ernie Serrano's death makes clear a very important issue in the fight against police brutality. Not only did it not need to happen, but his entire life could have been different if the society around him had prioritized different things. What if, instead of the city giving millions of dollars to the police every year, they had used that money to invest in things like education, healthcare, and housing? If, instead of spending more money on things that the police didn't need, money had been invested into low-income communities like the one Serrano lived in, this all would have been different. But the most important thing to understand about the ways the current system oppresses poor people is all the ways in which it was designed to. Since societies first started forming themselves around capitalism, the people who make the laws are often the ones who own the largest amount of capital. The privilege of punishing the less fortunate has always belonged to the upper classes, be they landed gentry or, today, senators and police officers. There was a theorist, a guy named Peter Kropotkin. He wrote a lot about abolition and police, and he talks about this a little bit in his essay, Law and Authority. He says, police, army, infrastructure, finance all serve one God, capital. The protection of the person, which is put forward as the true mission of law, occupies an imperceptible space among them, end quote. And this is true in many of the laws that low-income people are more likely to suffer from the upper class. Think about it. Why is loitering legal if they didn't want to squeeze money out of people who can't even afford homes? Why would they make drugs illegal? Why would they criminalize drugs if they weren't the ones who put them into that community in the first place, right? There are levels to it. And even though the law seems to protect people, the reality is that more often than not, it's just there to oppress people. It's just there to exploit people. So why would the keepers of the law be any different, And so explaining the origins of the law introduces the next important conclusion. Low-income communities are unequivocally the most victimized by the police. In 2019, a group of professors from schools like Harvard and UCLA got together to prove that that was the case. And when they examined different communities on things like race, things like income, there were 6 total characteristics that they judged them by. And it was found that across the board, the lower income communities were more victimized by the police than any other. Even though these low-income communities struggle under the weight of their poverty, they don't get the resources they need to improve. And instead, that money is given to the people who oppress them. It goes to the police. We're going to talk about police budgets. So cities across America give hundreds of millions of dollars to their police departments every year for weapons and technology, but the people who use that money are left in the lurch, right? So what if instead of buying new vehicles, new weapons, new clothes for the sheriff's department, the city of Riverside spent that money on things that would have helped Ernie Serrano, right? What if all the police departments use things that would have helped Eric Garner, George Floyd, Tyisha Miller, right? All people that have been killed by the police. Healthcare, safe injection sites, education, housing, all of this stuff could have been achieved had the money used for a police department instead been allocated towards community care. So that kind of infrastructure is known as something called a transformative justice. So transformative justice is an idea that became popular in 2020 over a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests, and Vice published an article where they explained a lot of a lot of like foundational transformative justice concept. And so they describe the idea as, quote, not only identifying what we don't want, but proactively practicing and putting in place things we want. Healthy relationships, good communication skills, and skills to de-escalate active or live harm and violence in the moment, end quote. So what if that was the attitude we as a society had towards people who were struggling, even or especially when that struggle led to crime? You know, if somebody is experiencing bad mental health, a bad addiction, how different would things be if their community came together rather than pushing them away for a circumstance that they can't even control? So if our goal is to stop crime, we first have to address the root causes of crime and move on from there. So the idea that police have a role in stopping crime is an understandable one, but it's dangerous. So the images of the police as the heroes in the fight against crime is one that pervades movies and TV, and even, you know, you can see right here, I Want to Be a Police Officer. That's a children's book, right? This is a common idea. But that idea is one without much logic behind it, especially when you consider the sense that crime itself is not the villain, but instead a lack of resources, right? If somebody gets mugged, somebody takes a couple $100s from them, the person will call the police will come, take notes for 20 minutes after taking 30 to get there, and then leave the person with the promise that maybe they'll find the person. So in that instance, what crime is stopped? Right? The person still doesn't have their stuff, they still got mugged, and even after entrusting themselves to the law, there's still no promise that they'll get restitution, right? And so that brings up an important point, which is that the police do not stop crime. They respond to it. They police it, right? That's the definition of the word. And so if their purpose was to stop crime, then their efforts would go towards distributing resources, harm reduction, providing housing people, right? But since those things don't happen, it has to be asked what the actual goals of the police are. So a guy named Michael Denzel Smith talks about these ideas in his piece, Police Reform is Not Enough, saying, quote, the police cannot solve the actual culprits in the lives of the unhoused. But if we deem homeless people, not poverty, the problem, then what police can do is make them disappear. None of the efforts of police go towards solving the actual problem that leads to crime. Poor communities are more likely to commit crime. They seem more likely to commit crime because crime is what they have to turn to in order to get the resources that they need just to survive. So instead of criminalizing that, we need to take care of the people who are forced to make those decisions. But if taking care of people is the priority, there's another group that needs to be taken care of too, right? We need to be thinking about the victims. And the good news is that there is an abolitionist response to that, because we want to show people that we care just as much about them as we do the people that hurt them. It's called transformative justice, and it, quote, offers a lens through which survivors can examine the underlying conditions where the violence occurred and identify what change they might want from the person who harmed them. Transformative justice, it's, you know, group therapy, because that's a lot of what it is, just talking, bringing your community around you. But then harm reduction, which saves lives, I love it. It has to do with reaching out to people who are experiencing things like drug addiction and helping them out so that they can, you know, find the solution for that and not, you know, die or even worse. So this is a long and arduous fight. And the solution is to not just focus on alternatives to the police, but alternatives to all of the systems that people live under, right? There are things that the police are meant to do. They're meant to help people. They're meant to stop crime. They're meant to protect people. But what happens when those goals aren't achieved? What happens when the police don't do those things, right? Keeping people safe, taking care of them is a worthy goal. And it starts when we get rid of the police. Thank you.